The ANBU Black Ops unit is one of the most iconic and interesting groups in all of Naruto. Despite this clandestine squad being mostly shrouded in mystery throughout the series, it does feature some of the world's strongest shinobi, in particular Kakashi and Itachi. So it got me thinking, what would happen if we took the two top dogs in the history of the ANBU and pitted them in a gauntlet-style battle against the powerful villainous group known as the Akatsuki? In other words, today we'll be exploring and breaking down ANBU Kakashi and ANBU Itachi versus the Akatsuki. Before we dive into these matchups, I believe it's important to go over the structure of the video, as well as the scaling we'll be using here for Kakashi and Itachi. As for the structure, essentially the idea is that Hiruzen has heard about this group called the Akatsuki and wants to eliminate this threat before it becomes a massive issue. So he asks his top two ANBU members, Kakashi and Itachi, to hunt down the members and take them out systematically. So while this is sort of a quote-unquote gauntlet style, we will be treating it as it would have happened or could have happened within the structure of the series, with Kakashi and Itachi getting a full recovery between rounds. Each round will be a neutral battleground, even though I do think these two would probably do their best to assassinate the Akatsuki members when they come up against them, but it is just more fun this way because I could say, oh well, they just set up a plan to kill them when they don't know what's going on, but then we don't get to see how they match up. So that said, the version of the Akatsuki that this dynamic duo will be facing off against is the version that would have existed at the time both Kakashi and Itachi would have been in the ANBU together. Now, it's difficult to piece together who exactly would have been a part of the squad, as we don't get a ton of information on the group's members pre-Shippuden. However, I think that what I've put together makes sense. It's worth noting that the databook entry for the Akatsuki implies that they move in pairs in order to successfully capture Jinchuriki, but we know that they don't actually capture their first Jinchuriki until much later than this point in time that we'll be discussing. Also, even in chapter 329, when we find out that Hidan is the newest member other than Tobi, we get confirmation that the Akatsuki are still in their first phase of their plan, out of 3 phases, gathering as much money as possible in order to form a mercenary army. So what this tells me is that they probably did usually move in pairs from the jump, with a few rare exceptions. One of those exceptions is Kakuzu. We get confirmation in the databooks that he killed his last 3 teammates prior to Hidan and stole their hearts, so he won't have a partner here. Kisame is also interesting because we don't really get an indication for who his partner could have been, so he'll be alone as well. I would pair him with Kakuzu, but it would just defy the canon material that we have because Kakuzu killed his last 3 teammates, so Kisame couldn't have been one of them. It is a bit unclear if these two would have been a part of the Akatsuki at this point, but Kisame was serving Obito as quote-unquote Madara as far back as when he took control of Yagara, so he should be in the group, and then there's nothing in canon that contradicts Kakuzu being there. If he had 3 teammates before Hidan joined, he's been in there for a while, so I think it's safe to put him here as well. Then we have our powerhouse duos of Orochimaru and Sasori, Pain and Konan, and finally Obito and Zetsu. These pairings definitely existed at this point in the story, so there should be no fuss here. But now that we know who Kakashi and Itachi will be facing off against, we can quickly discuss the scaling for these versions of Kakashi and Itachi as well. I went over the scaling for each of these characters in depth in my ANBU Kakashi and ANBU Itachi videos, so definitely check those out for a more in-depth breakdown. But for Kakashi, we're going to get him firmly in that Kage tier of combatant, since he scales above Mukai Kohinata, who's above the combination of 3 Tomo Shisui and 3 Tomo Itachi, who are stated to be above anyone in the Uchiha clan, which would include Kage level Fugaku. The fact that Mukai throttled 3 Tomo Shisui and 3 Tomo Itachi means that there's at least a significant gap between this version of Kakashi and Fugaku, so I think putting Kakashi at a floor of mid-Kage level is good. For me, low Kage level would be around Rasa's level, and high Kage would be around Tsunade's level, so putting him on par with somebody like early 4th War Gaara is pretty fair in my opinion. This is backed up by the fact that early 4th War Kakashi alludes to showing off his ANBU power when he says he's going to live up to his nickname, the Copy Ninja, the moniker gained in the ANBU. So if you have issues with this scaling, definitely go and check out the ANBU Kakashi video. I made a lot better in-depth explanation and explained why it all makes sense. I know this is a new meta, but for the sake of the video and for the sake of argument, just trust me for now. For Itachi, we'll be using pre-MS Itachi, but we may use Massacre Itachi later on in the video if it's required. So for pre-MS, I was able to get him around peak Jonin to low Kage tier, and the reason for that is because he's implied to be toward the top of his clan, at least top 3, and Shisui implies that he can take on basically the entire fighting force of the Uchiha clan alone, outside of Fugaku and Shisui himself. Since we know that there are numerous Jonin in the Uchiha, as well as dozens of other Sharingan-wielding shinobi, some being Genin, some being Chunin, Itachi being able to take down dozens of shinobi like this firmly places him in that peak Jonin tier, but likely closer to the low Kage tier. The reason I say this is because even just mid to high tier Jonin combatants like Asuma and Hiyashi are capable of taking down numerous shinobi at a time with relative ease, so it seems this is the level you need to be in order to do that with dozens of shinobi ranging from Genin to Jonin. It's also worth noting that Shisui believes that upon awakening the Mangekyo, Itachi has the potential to become the strongest person in the clan or even in the world, so this would imply that he believed Itachi was at or at least approaching his own level without taking the MS into consideration. This is a much stronger version of Shisui than the one who got thrashed by Mukai, so it's pretty notable that he thinks this highly of Itachi here. We'll go over Massacre Itachi scaling later on if necessary, but for now, this is where we are. Kakashi is around that mid-Kage tier, with Itachi around the low Kage tier. One final thing to point out here before going into the matchups is that these two would work incredibly well with one another. Not only were they literally on the same ANBU squad together, they're also two of the 3 to 5 smartest characters in the entire series, so that will pose an enormous problem for the enemies that they face. I think because Kakashi is stronger, more experienced, and was Itachi's team leader before, Itachi would likely defer to Kakashi's leadership, but obviously Kakashi trusts Itachi to take care of himself as well, knowing that he's a formidable shinobi in his own right. So that takes care of the groundwork, but we can finally get into the matchups. Before that though, if you are enjoying the video so far or have learned anything, I'd greatly appreciate if you like and subscribe. And if you don't like and subscribe, let's just say I can't promise to not introduce your mother to the thick calves. So the first person Kakashi and Itachi are sent after is Kakuzu, the Immortal Man. All we know about Kakuzu at this point is that he definitely has the Jiangu ability, and likely has at least 2 hearts. Since he's stated to have killed his previous 3 teammates and taken their hearts, it's unclear if he did this because he was lacking those hearts initially, or he just lost one in battle and then took his teammate's heart afterwards to replenish it. But here's the thing, I think it's fairly obvious, based on the scaling from my ANBU Kakashi video, that this version of Kakashi is significantly stronger than the version we saw face off against Kakuzu in the Akatsuki suppression arc. Because that version of Kakashi and Kakuzu were relative, and it's arguably a stronger version of Kakuzu and a weaker version of Kakashi, I think it's overkill to have Itachi there, as Kakashi should just be able to pack him up by himself, so I don't really think we should spend too much time on this. I think it's fairly obvious that Kakashi and Itachi should take this one with relatively low difficulty. Next up, our Sharingan warriors take on the tailless tailed beast, Kisame Hoshigaki. Now, this one is sort of weird for a couple of reasons. Number one, we do not know what Kisame has in his arsenal here. He obviously has water style, immense chakra, and wields Samehada, but other than that, it's kind of ambiguous. There's nothing for us to go off of in terms of whether or not he has the super shark bomb, confused with Samehada, or has the giant water bubble, and those are really key aspects of his arsenal as we get later on into the series, and those would make a huge difference here if he did have them. But number two, this Kisame is probably much weaker than the version we get in Shippuden, and probably even part 1. But he does still have to be powerful to have taken down one of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist in his master and taken Samehada from him. The reason we know he's probably weaker is because it's basically outright stated that Guy is superior to him in part 1, with this statement from the 3rd anime profile guide stating, he kicks away his inferior. Also, Guy is stated to be constantly training and getting stronger, so the version of Guy that was forced to use the 6th gate versus a 30% clone of Kisame is undoubtedly stronger than Kisame in Part 1, making that Shippuden version of Kisame significantly stronger than his Part 1 counterpart, since he can push him to the 7th gate. This likely means that he's constantly training his own strength, developing new jutsu as he goes as well. You could also argue that exposure to tailed beast chakra multiple times via absorption may have increased the potency of his own chakra or just advanced his body in some way, as he did absorb Gyuki's chakra and likely absorb Son Goku's as well. There's not really anything to definitively back this claim up, but I do think that absorbing tailed beast chakra has the potential to affect your own chakra and physiology in weird ways. So just how strong is this early Akatsuki version of Kisame? Well, we just established that he's probably weaker than his Part 1 counterpart, and his Part 1 counterpart is weaker than Part 1 Guy, and Part 1 Guy is weaker than the version of Kakashi that compares to ANBU Kakashi, so he should just get 1v1 soloed by Kakashi. I mean, honestly, I would say even Itachi has a good chance against him, being a low Kage combatant, whereas this version of Kisame doesn't even scale to a peak Jonin / low Kage combatant in Part 1 Guy. So I don't really think that there's too much that has to be discussed here. Maybe you could say that he has a chance if he's able to connect with Samehada and steal some of their chakra, but I don't know. I think he just probably gets outscaled here since he's not even as strong as his Part 1 counterpart. So, that being said, if this were Shippuden Kisame, maybe we could have a better fight, but this version of the Tailless Tailed Beast should go down fairly easily. Now we're talking. This duo is absolutely cracked. Orochimaru at this point in time is likely going to be the strongest person in this fight, as he's easily one of the strongest people in the world. Orochimaru and the other Sannin consistently scale to or above the 5 Kage, so this means that he should be up there in that KCM1 Naruto tier of speed and physicality, along with the likes of the top N Kage, including Tsunade, who we get to see later on be relative to or maybe even above V2A. That being said, Kakashi exists in that tier as well, since we know that it's fair to scale him to a late Shippuden or even early War Arc version of himself. This version of himself being able to combo with the likes of KCM1 Naruto fairly easily and match 6th Gate Guy's speed, who also is able to combo with KCM Naruto fairly easily. We have combatants who were in that same tier, but the problem is Orochimaru still has a massive power advantage. From his massive snake summons to his world-renowned ninjutsu, Orochimaru has the arsenal to put either of these guys down, but he also has insane recovery ability, stamina, and he's just really difficult to kill. So even though Kakashi should be able to keep up with him, as they should be in a similar tier of speed, that just means that he's not going to get absolutely steamrolled. He is still going to be pressured because he's going to have a lot to deal with, and that includes Itachi. Even with Itachi there as support, this could be a difficult battle. But then you throw Sasori into the mix, and this becomes a really difficult match for our Sharingan duo. So just how does the fight go down? Something I do think is fair to point out is that Kakashi and Itachi will probably have significantly better teamwork than Orochimaru and Sasori, since, they don't hate each other, so that will help them a lot here. I think they'd likely try to break apart into 1v1s, understanding that if they can just stall Orochimaru for long enough, they could turn a 2v2 into a 2v1. And quickly, before anyone types out something along the lines of, ANBU Kakashi was paralyzed in fear by Orochimaru, or Part 1 Kakashi got fear hacked, so how did he have a chance? Let me stop you right there. Number one, the ANBU Kakashi anime arc is not canon, so that is not a part of the equation here. Number two, as I explain in depth in my ANBU Kakashi video, Part 1 Kakashi is significantly weaker than this version of the Copy Ninja. So even though Orochimaru is likely even peak or high Kage, while ANBU Kakashi is probably closer to mid Kage, giving Orochimaru a clear edge, Kakashi's scaling should be good enough to where he's not getting absolutely blitzed and one-tapped. Here's where I think it's important to also mention that Orochimaru would likely force Itachi to fight him, as he'd be pining after his Sharingan. With Kakashi being the stronger of the two, he would want to protect Itachi from the Sannin, but he'd first have to worry about Sasori. And Sasori is weird. Firstly, we don't really know how early he started moving around in the Hiriko puppet, but we have good indications that he's been doing it for a while now, so I do think it's fair to assume that he would be doing it here. However, Kakashi and Itachi have Sharingan, and the Sharingan allows for the user to see chakra. In the Itachi novels, he's able to actually see his brother and parents through walls via the Sharingan chakra perception, so I think it's fair to assume that either Kakashi or Itachi, when facing off against these monsters, would recognize that. So while Itachi does his best to fend off Orochimaru, Kakashi will be doing his best to end the fight with Sasori quickly, and knowing that he has to get through the Hiroko puppet, I think he's just going to try to do a full frontal assault and blitz him with the Raikiri and try to break through the defenses. But the problem is, in order to do that, he would have to get past all of the incoming attacks. The needles, the fog, the tail, etc., they're all laced with poison and would be a real problem if Kakashi didn't have the Sharingan and a significant speed advantage. I mean, honestly, I think the fact that this Kakashi should be significantly above the early Shippuden version that faces Deidara, I mean, he should just be way better than Sakura, and he's also better stylistically against Sasori than Sakura would be, again, because of the Sharingan. So because Sakura was able to weave around those attacks on her own, this is stated, part of it is Chiyo, but then there's a section where she is doing this by herself, and there's a note talking about how she trained her agility with Tsunade, because she's a medic and that's important, and blah blah blah. So because she's able to do that, Kakashi should not have an issue, so I do think he just lights up a Raikiri, dodges all of the incoming attacks, blitzes, and breaks right through the Hiroko puppet's defenses, because if Sakura can do it with a punch, Kakashi should be able to do it with a Raikiri. But once he's through the Hiroko puppet, this is where it gets even weirder. We genuinely have no idea, A, how early Sasori turned himself into a puppet, and B, how early he got the third Kazekage puppet. If we go based off of the Storm Revolution game, which is potentially canon to the anime, Sasori has the third Kazekage puppet, but doesn't appear to have made himself into a puppet yet when he's recruited into the Akatsuki. However, Chiyo seems to imply that he hasn't aged a day since he left the village at 15. Since Sasori is 35 when he dies, and the Uchiha Massacre would have happened about a decade prior to this, he would have been about 25 in the time frame that we're using here. We don't know how soon after leaving Suna that Sasori joins the Akatsuki, so it's totally unclear whether or not he would have turned his body into a puppet, like, right after it or a little bit later, but even if he hadn't done that by the time he joined the Akatsuki, he almost definitely would have done it by this point, since there would have been several years that would have passed. I say this because the difference between 15 and 25 for anybody is quite a bit in terms of how much you age. I mean, a 3 to 5 year gap would be fine, but a 10-year gap is crazy. So I just think it's far more likely that he turned himself into a puppet earlier on and got recruited by the Akatsuki almost right after leaving Suna, as opposed to getting recruited much later on whenever he would have aged several years. So he does have his puppet body, meaning that he just has the core, so that would be the chakra signature that Kakashi and Itachi were seeing, but it also means that he has a bunch of hidden weapons within his body, and instead of just getting really headcanony and trying to just come up with some random assertion about what I think he would have, the safest way to do this, in my opinion, is just to give him the same weapons he had in the fight against Sakura and Chiyo. Do I think that he had these same exact weapons? Probably not, but is there any way to determine what he did have? No, not at all. So not only would Kakashi be facing down this puppet body, this is probably when he would bring out the third Kazekage puppet as well. So Sasori's two strongest puppets, himself and the third Kazekage, would be facing down against the copy ninja. So what does Kakashi do here? I think Kakashi would recognize that if this fight drags on, A, he's at a disadvantage because of the numbers, and B, Itachi's disadvantage just becomes greater the longer that this goes on too. So Kakashi would be trying to end the fight as quickly as possible. Recognizing where the core is via his Sharingan, Kakashi would be able to deduce that the core is the key. Even after the third Kazekage puppet emerges, he should still be fine with the speed advantage he holds paired with the Sharingan perception amp, giving him the ability to seamlessly weave all of Sasori's attacks. If he is forced to take on the third head-on, he should also just be able to blast through the Iron Sand with the Raikiri, since we actually do see Boruto use Purple Lightning to blast through Shinki's Iron Sand in the Boruto Chunin exams. So, long story short, Kakashi would have no issue getting through the third, and should be able to pressure Sasori enough pretty heavily with his superior combat speed. With the third Kazekage puppet out of the way, Kakashi is just gonna pressure Sasori with everything he has. He has long-range ninjutsu with the 1K techniques, he has his Raikiri, which is probably going to be his go-to, so I think that either way, he's just gonna push Sasori into a corner, and eventually the 100 pumpets are gonna come out. But these should be a non-factor, because Sakura is just able to fold these things one at a time, just like knocking them down like dominoes, so I see no reason to believe that Kakashi wouldn't be able to do something similar. Even if Kakashi doesn't want to use long-range ninjutsu or even a variety of ninjutsu, we see him in Kakashi Gaiden use his Chidori to just fold like 18 shadow clones, so he can just keep the Raikiri active for an indeterminate amount of time and just take down the puppets one at a time en route to taking down Sasori. And also, one other cool thing that might be worth mentioning is that we may actually get to see a Twin Lightning Shiver, since it's stated that Kishimoto has had a hand and say in the arsenals and fighting styles of the Naruto characters in the Storm games, particularly the Ultimates. You could say that just like Revolution and Generations, that may only make it canon to the anime, but I think the fact that Kishimoto was basically saying, yeah, these characters in these forms should have these moves, that makes sense, allows room for me to argue that these should be able to be spoken as canon techniques. But now that Sasori is taken out, whether it be from a cool Twin Lightning Shiver or just a standard Raikiri, how is Itachi doing? The reason I wanted to talk about Sasori first is because this one is even weirder. What I mean by that is this can either go really good or really bad for Team ANBU. Allow me to explain. On one hand, we saw Itachi use a base Sharingan Genjutsu to incapacitate Orochimaru in canon. On the other hand, this is after the Uchiha Massacre and Itachi's Mangekyo Sharingan Awakening, both of which would naturally amp his base Sharingan prowess. So, there's a very real possibility that Itachi may not be able to replicate this feat without those amps. You could also easily argue, though, that since there's no jutsu rank for the demonic illusion shackling stakes, the genjutsu he used against Akatsuki Orochimaru, and because Itachi doesn't feel the need to use the MS in that situation, that this would be something he should be able to pull off pre-MS. So, this is where we're at. If you think Itachi can do this to Orochimaru, he just wins basically off rip, and then Kakashi and him clean up Sasori in like 30 seconds. If you don't think that he could do this, Orochimaru honestly probably just beats him down and attempts to use his body transfer technique, or just rips his eyes out of his skull and takes them for himself. Either way, this would not be good for anyone but Orochimaru. Oro here would be in peak physical condition, unlike when he tried to take over Sasuke. So, if he does try to take over Itachi, you could make a solid argument that he would win that struggle for Itachi's body. You could also argue that if Kakashi cleans up Sasori fast enough, he could just come help, and then you have a 2v1 with Kakashi and Itachi that they should be able to win, or at least they have a pretty solid chance. So, Scenario A, Itachi wins via Genjutsu immediately. Scenario B, Orochimaru takes Itachi's body or eyes and then folds Kakashi badly, and the rest of the world pays the price. At Scenario C, Orochimaru attempts to steal Itachi's body, and Kakashi comes to the rescue, killing or severely wounding Orochimaru in the process, leading Oro to either flee or die. One could make the argument that Orochimaru could just go into the Hydra form, which he should have here, but I don't think that it would be enough to take down these two Kage-level combatants. If you're of the opinion that Orochimaru wins this, then this is the point when we give Itachi the MS and he just wins via Tsukiyomi, or, the demonic illusion shackling stakes like he did in canon, but I think they should win this more times than not, even without the MS, based on the stipulations that we've put in place. This one will probably be the most controversial, so definitely let me know what you guys think in the comments. This one is a bit more straightforward. First, let's just get the obvious out of the way. Konan is a Sharingan Genjutsu victim off a rip. She's not going to be a factor here at all. Second, I do think that early War Kakashi, who ANBU Kakashi can be argued to scale up to physically, should be able to pack up Pain 1v1. However, this is predicated on him having the Kamui as well as intel on Pain's abilities. Without those two things, even with Itachi's help, I'm not sure they'd be able to take down the leader of the Akatsuki. I mean, Let's be serious. Even in his fight with Naruto, Pain had to hold back a good deal in order to just seal him away instead of killing him. He's also fatigued heading into the fight and had to mow down the entirety of Konoha prior to facing off against Naruto, at which point he beat him up and restrained him with relative ease. This same Naruto also had intel on Pain's abilities and fighting style, so Pain basically stalemated Naruto while having multiple disadvantages stacked against him. That said, he has none of those disadvantages here. The only way I see Kakashi and pre-MS Itachi winning this is if Pain holds back to conserve energy, giving away clues to his abilities, and these two geniuses are able to cook up some counters. Otherwise, they're cooked. They have no answer for a chaotic Shinra Tensei or the massive animal summons, and even if they manage to take down some of the paths, which I think they would, they can be revived. Ultimately, the numbers, power, and stamina advantages all go to Pain here, so he should win this match fairly easily. Again, if Pain stalls for too long, he is at risk of giving those tactical mutants a foothold, but he has no reason to stall, so they'd likely just get blasted into oblivion by a chaotic Shinra Tensei, and it's over. But if Itachi has the Mangekyo Sharingan, it's a different story entirely. First, he has the Amaterasu to counter the animal summons, as well as take down multiple paths of Pain at once. This would force them to reveal their abilities, such as the Preta or Diva needing to use the absorption or repulsion. This gives Kakashi and Itachi a massive advantage, because now they at least know somewhat how their abilities work. While Itachi's Tsukiyomi likely doesn't matter here, his Susanoo is invaluable, as the massacre takes place a year after he awoke DMS, so that time plus the emotional amps from the massacre should, in my opinion, leave him with a fully armored half Susanoo like what he has in Shippuden. Along with the natural defense it provides, Itachi also gains access to the Yasaka Magatama beads, which is implied to be his strongest attack. So now our duo has two highly effective long-range abilities and a nearly perfect defense. But what this battle is largely predicated on is whether or not you believe Itachi's Susanoo comes with the Totsuka Blade and Yata Mirror, or if he had to acquire and collect them, as Orochimaru implies. If you think he does have them, whether you think that it just comes stock with the Susanoo, or that he collected them in his first year of having the Mangekyo, I think Kakashi and Itachi should win this. Itachi's Amaterasu, Yasaka Magatama, and Totsuka Blade offer solid options to take down any of the paths, while Kakashi's KCM Naruto Speed and Raikiri one-tap ability provides amazing support for any paths trying to evade said attacks. Kakashi and Itachi also have great teamwork, and their combination Sharingan perception abilities should allow for them to offset the advantage granted by the shared vision of the paths of Pain. More importantly though, they now have an answer for a chaotic Shinra Tensei in the Yata Mirror, along with an answer for the Chubaku Tensei in an Amaterasu or Totsuka Blade being able to one-tap the Diva path if he uses it. People already debate Itachi versus Pain, and while I think Pain wins, it's certainly close, but then you throw in a Kage-level combatant in ANBU Kakashi, and I think it's just too much for the paths of Pain to handle. Now, if Itachi doesn't have the spirit weapons, there's nothing standing between them and a chaotic Shinra Tensei sending them to an early grave. Even if Amaterasu and the Yasaka Magatama help out a lot, they'd still need to spend time learning Pain's abilities, and at any point in the fight, Pain does have a one-hit KO button, like a Mike Tyson uppercut, that they just don't have any answer for. So no, the Susanoo is not blocking that without the Yata Mirror, and without being able to block the Shinra Tensei, they're just kinda cooked. So, depending on your interpretation of Itachi's Susanoo, this one could go either way. I threw Zetsu in here just to give Obito a partner, but he's honestly a non-factor. Regardless of which version of Itachi we go with, he's just getting one-paneled, so he's not really worth talking about. But also, he's not worth talking about because pre-Mangekyo Itachi is not worth talking about here either. I mean, Obito never even acknowledges him until after he awakens the MS, and MS Itachi would just one-tap Zetsu with Amaterasu. So, I think it's fairly obvious that Mangekyo Sharingan Itachi is the only one worth talking about here, as even though Kakashi is super strong, he's not going to be able to make up the difference between him and Obito with just some help from base Sharingan Itachi. And the only things in Kakashi's and Itachi's arsenals that really have a shot of actually countering Obito are Kakashi's lightning clones and Itachi's explosive clones, respectively. If they're able to figure out how Obito's Kamui works, which I think they would given enough time, these things actually are a pretty pretty good counter for it and would open the door for them being able to damage or even incapacitate Obito. And I do think that the clone feint strategies are going to be really prevalent here and in all of the other battles, as Choza implies that Kakashi uses lightning clone traps a lot when fighting someone whose abilities he's unaware of. And we know that ANBU Itachi does something similar with explosive clones, since Kakashi recognizes his explosive clone strategy when protecting Kurenai from the attack. So I do think it's likely that they would try and set a trap like this during the battle, which could open up an opportunity for them to defeat the real leader of the Akatsuki. If one of these clone feints lands, it would create an opportunity for an Amaterasu or Totsuka Blade GG, but the timing would have to be absolutely impeccable. This is also assuming that Kakashi and Itachi implement this strategy off-rip, or at least before one of them gets warped into the Kamui dimension. It is worth noting here, though, that Itachi does know about Obito's phasing ability, as he saw it up close both when Tenma was killed by Obito and right after that when he tried to attack Obito, so this may allow for them to come up with a strategy fairly quickly, but it's just hard to say. What is interesting about this, though, is that Obito's main win condition is gone too, because he's probably not going to be able to warp them into the Kamui dimension either, since they'd be watching each other's backs, and if Fu and Torine are able to figure out how Obito's ability works and land a successful blow, I see no reason why Itachi and Kakashi, who are way smarter than Fu and Torine, wouldn't be able to do the same thing, especially with this prior knowledge of the phasing. So I do think that Kakashi and Itachi would be able to successfully land a meaningful blow in this fight, either by coordinating their attacks like Fu and Torine, watching each other's backs and striking when Obito goes to pull one of them into Kamui, or getting a bit lucky with one of the clone feints, as they are both better strategists than Obito. So Obito's main ability is countered, leaving him with only one win con, Izanagi. I do believe that Kakashi and Itachi would be able to pressure Obito and land a finishing blow, but as soon as that happens, Obito launches Izanagi and likely reappears behind Kakashi, removing him from the equation with some sort of kunai stab or maybe some wood style. Now, you could argue that maybe this would also be a lightning clone, and I would love to argue that, but two lightning clone feints working in the same battle against somebody as smart as Obito is a bit tough to swallow, so yeah, we'd be stretching it a bit here. But this would lead to a 1v1 between Mangekyo Sharingan Itachi and Obito with only one remaining eye. This is an encounter that I believe Obito would win. First of all, Tsukiyomi's not working, since Obito was able to control Kurama with his base Sharingan, a feat that not even Itachi using his Mangekyo could pull off according to the databooks. Genjutsu's off the table. Second, Amaterasu isn't working, since databooks almost outright tell us that Obito was able to phase through it. And third, the Totsuka Blade, Yadamir, and Susanoo don't really matter here due to Obito's passive Kamui. Ultimately, Obito's far superior stamina would get him the W here. After eliminating Kakashi, Obito would just need to use Wood Style to pressure Itachi into using the Susanoo to exhaust his own chakra, whittling him down until he's fatigued enough to take out. You could argue for an Izanagi Uno reverse card here, or maybe even Izanami, but I don't think so because Obito knows about both of these techniques and would be prepared, while Kakashi's lack of knowledge on these techniques is what would lead to his demise. In the end, Obito wins more times than not, using Izanagi to get a killing blow on Kakashi and utilizing his superior stamina to defeat Itachi. This would actually lead to Obito getting his other Sharingan back, which would mean the end of the world for everyone else. I mean, nobody is stopping that dude if that happens, so yeah, that's kind of a crazy outcome here. But I will say again though, Itachi and Kakashi do have counters for Obito's abilities, specifically in utilizing weaponized clones or syncing up their attacks with their own strategies that I do think would work here, but their lack of intel would betray them here, particularly Kakashi getting taken off the field for not knowing about Izanagi. Even Itachi, who does have an awareness of Obito's ability to phase through attacks at this point, still doesn't know how to counter it. So, although they'd likely figure that out along the way, I think it's more likely that Obito just beats them to the punch and wins 6 to 7 times out of 10. Well, that is the video. Kakashi and Itachi actually do fairly well here, only really requiring Itachi's Mangekyo once they get to the high tiers. If you agree with this or disagree, make sure to let me know down below, and also let me know what you want to see this duo go up against next. This is a video I've been wanting to do for a while, so I hope you guys all enjoyed, and if you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss out when new content drops. And speaking of new content, next week I have another exciting video, one I'm doing with my boy Virtue. This video will be going over how Jonin Minato would do in Sasuke's position and running the 5 Kage Summit Gauntlet. I'm super excited to go over this, so again, hit that notification bell to be alerted when it drops, but that's it for today. So if you made it to the end, I just want to say thank you very much. I genuinely greatly appreciate it. But until next time, have an awesome day.